So you hired 9 AEs in 6 months at People AI. Like, how did you approach your AE hiring, and sort of what do you look for when you're hiring AEs?
So if there's one theme from this conversation, Alex, is probably mindset and curiosity. So I'm a big believer that there's a handful of fundamental things that just cannot be taught. Natural curiosity. Put anyone in the room, and if you have the just internal inertia and desire to go ask smart questions and understand what's being said in the room and go seek for the second and third and fourth, you always have to get at business pain or getting to know somebody or what have you, right? But curiosity goes a long, long way. And then mindset of wanting to learn, trying to figure out how you go solution and to challenge yourself. All those things I think are just intangibles that can't be taught. I think it's those two things you combine, like an IQ with an EQ mix, can't be taught. You can teach experience. I can teach you sales process or meta or what have you, right? But the other things are so critically important. And those are, to me, the two absolute requirements in folks that I talk to.
Are there specific like interview questions or situations you put people through in an interview process to like test for curiosity? Like, how do you actually do that?
Yeah. So my favorite question these days is for curiosity. Tell me something that you taught yourself in the last 6 months and tell me how you did it. And people always go, personal, professional. I go, I don't know, pick one. And you get some really interesting ones. One person the other day told me they wanted to get better actually at asking questions. So he's like, I started a podcast. I was like, tell me more about that. How'd you go do it? Right. So it's really, for me, you also get to know people just to understand what they talk about, but you can start to get an understanding of, is this person like really a naturally curious individual, and how do they go apply that for themselves?
And I guess, why is curiosity so important for sales? Is it just because in qualification, you just have to ask deep questions and keep asking, and then you can kind of put that back on the prospect? Like, why is that the single most important thing?
So it's a good question. So I think that you can teach someone to go ask the right handful of questions in the deal, right? You get on a first call, we're going to do discovery, Mr. Customer, Mr. Prospect. I've got my list of my top 10 discovery questions, fine. The thing is, when the customer gives you that first answer, the ability to not just say, you know what, let me go from number one to number two, let me go dig in on that and go ask the next question, right? And go and ask the next natural question, all in that line to keep getting at whether it's business pain or why that person cares or what have you, right? But the ability to keep asking questions on that initial one that weren't planned, right? But that's something that is very hard to teach. And that's what's really intriguing about that as a quality for me.
Yeah. And I think it's also really hard to teach like that, like coming across as authentic as you ask those questions. Like, yes, you're genuinely curious about the problem that they're experiencing and how they're dealing with it today, as opposed to like, hey, I'm just reading my questions off of, my notes tab. And like that authenticity just comes across in people's voices and the way that they ask and talk. And it's super interesting. I'm interviewing a bunch of sales reps right now, so this is a very top of mind. Yeah,
of course.
How did you earn trust with the People AI team? Because I'm sure, there's already a sales team. You're the new leader being brought in. Like, how did you earn trust, and how would you kind of describe your own leadership style?
Yeah. So, I think there's a handful of things, and it's a critical question. So whether I did this at Sprinkle or People AI or where I am currently, I think there's a handful, 5 key pillars for me. So I talk about myself. My biggest strength is also maybe my biggest weakness, and that's empathy. And I think it goes into number 2, which is everyone's different, right? And act accordingly. So understanding how the team and what they individually care about, where their strengths and weaknesses are, what their situation's like at home or with family or what have you, how to have empathy towards that situation and how to treat and work with and help develop personally, professionally, all those folks in a way that makes sense for them, I think is really critical. I think number 3 is trust and accountability. Probably often used quote, trust is hard to earn, easy to lose, so I think it goes both ways, and my goal is to earn trust and allows you then to have a challenging conversation from time to time and hold each other accountable, But I think those conversations only go well when there's mutual trust and respect between the two people having them. Fourth is I typically tell the folks that I work with that I'm not going to ask you to do anything I wouldn't do myself. I find that to be disingenuous. And then the fifth is I try my best to be consistent. I try to be a 4 to 6 guy. I definitely have energy. I can get excited. I can get upset, what have you. But almost all the time, we've probably all worked for someone before. Maybe you have, Alex, of like, or work with somebody that you give them good news and they're over the moon, and you give them bad news and it's like someone just killed their cow, and it's like they're just so on either side of it. And it's unsettling, right? It's uncomfortable when that happens. So I really try to be as consistent as possible in my approach. Good news is good. Bad news is okay, fine. Celebrate things, but trying to be consistent in approach. And I think those have always served me as good pillars in how I work with the team.
I'm curious, do you feel like you mold your management or leadership style to the person who you're managing? Or are you fairly consistent? Do you treat everyone kind of equally the same, or do you, I don't know, mirror back like kind of what they're sharing with you? And how do you think about like each person's unique quirks as you work with them?
So I think there needs to be some level of consistency, just because there's not enough time in the day to go like be full-fledged like individual to everybody, but being able to have an individual touch of, hey, I know this person, for instance, like this person is his or her strength is in how they communicate, but they struggle with like deck building, you know what I mean? Or another person, they struggle to ask the tough question of the customer. Another one struggles with this, like, or this one has something's happening at home, their family member is whatever, right? Like how I work with those individuals and how I my day to day with them and those interactions, I really try and vary and I don't want to say acquiesce, but like I adjust accordingly, but I do try to keep a level of consistency so that there's clear expectations and accountability on both sides.
And I guess it goes back to I think the first leadership principle you mentioned was empathy and sort of meeting people where they're at and understanding what they're going through, right? And then kind of molding your style and how you work with them,
Totally.
accordingly. Yeah.